Welcome back, everybody, to the First Strike Podcast. I'm your host, and I go by the Marathon Don. This is episode number 13. Here in the First Strike Podcast, we strike first, we talk later, and our weekly episode provide insight into everything notable in combat sport. I'm giving you my high-level analysis on everything in the world of combat culture. And guess what? We are officially the fastest growing MMA podcast in the world, combat sports podcast in the world, with over 6,000 subscribers, and it's all thanks to each and every one of you guys. So thank you so much for supporting us. So let's get right into it, because we do have a few things to talk about that happened this past week. So last night it was Leon Murphy just eking out a decision versus Josh Emmett. And when I say eking out, it wasn't the most exciting fight. It was a very tactical decision, and it's one of those underrated, not necessarily underrated, but under the radar fight nights where nothing really major happened, but someone like Leon Murphy beating Josh Emmett definitely solidifies upward trajectory in the rankings. So for Leon Murphy, good win. Not really going to earn himself any new fans, but he stays undefeated. And Josh Emmett, as we know, he's a brutal power puncher. Where do they go from here? For someone like Josh Emmett and even Leon Murphy, I really don't think that this type of fight, the way that Josh Emmett lost, is really going to move him down the rankings too much at all. And for Leon Murphy, I just think that it continues that momentum that he's already had. In terms of next opponents, I don't really have anyone in mind for either or. It was a stay busy fight for both of them. Nothing notable, no major big moments to discuss. I think one of the highlights was a takedown, and I think that just tells you enough about that fight. So overall, nothing really major in that particular fight. But let's really get into the big news of the week. The big rematch that was announced by Dana White on April 1st. And the funny thing is that on April 1st, there's so much stuff going on social media. So obviously, it's April Fool's Day, so I don't really know what's true or not. So anytime you get any big fights announcement that are fights that you don't expect on April Fool's Days, I'm thinking it's a joke. So I don't even pay mind to it. A bunch of my friends, they're sending me the fight, and they're like, oh, Sugar Sean O'Malley is fighting Merab. And I'm like, no way they're going to rematch. Like, the fight just happened, less than a year ago. And it was a fight that, to me, wasn't competitive at all. Merab took away the championship, completely shut down Sugar Sean, out-wrestled him, outstruck him, and guess what? It got to the point that he was showboating. Like, there's no way they're going to do a rematch that, in reality, Sugar Sean hasn't even earned. He hasn't fought since that loss, since that dominating loss. So Dana White puts the video out. I see the video, but I'm thinking, like, it's April Fool's. So I don't even report it. I don't give no feedback. I don't even comment on it, because I'm thinking it's just a joke. He's going to come out in the night or the next day and say, got him. I got each and every one of you. But guess what, guys? The next day, April 2nd, I go back to my resources and take a look. And it's not an April Fool's joke. It is really solidified, and in fact, it's going to be going down in the Prudential Center, and it's going to be co-headlined by Kayla Harrison versus Julia Pena for the championship on the women's side. And I can't believe it. I am shocked. Like, I understand that Sugar Sean is probably the most marketable fighter in the weight class, but man, oh man, like, I don't know what this fight does for him, because I don't see any way that he's going to beat Merab right now. Like, I just feel like Merab has a style. It's almost like Sugar Sean O'Malley kryptonite. And I would have loved Sugar Sean to take on someone like a Cody Garbrandt, maybe like a Figueiredo, and give her these action-packed stylistic matchups that, in my opinion, they benefit him more. Like, if he fights someone like Cody Garbrandt, it's main event potential, it's guaranteed fireworks, and more likely than not, someone's getting knocked out. Like, Cody Garbrandt's not going to come out here and grapple you or wall and stall. So I kind of felt like Sugar Sean O'Malley should have gone back to the drawing boards and used his marketability to get these stylistically appropriate matchups that would have, created bigger moments, add to his highlight reels, like a Figueiredo, like a Cody Garbrandt, or what about even a Jose Aldo? Like, that would have been fantastic. But instead, he's going to rematch the champion, and this is this Merab he's an engine. He's an engine. He's a guy that is not slowing down anytime soon. You know, he's beating a who's who in the division. And when I really think about his path to victory, it's the same as the last time. You know, he didn't have to change anything. It was so one-sided that there was a point in the matchup that Merab was showboating. He was showboating. Just think about that. He's showboating against one of the most popular knockout artists in the division, and he's so confident in his domination that he's showboating. Like, it was crazy. And I just don't see how what Sugar Sean could have done in the interim to beat him. Like, Merab just coming off a title defense of Umar Nurmagomedov, you know, the real dark horse of the division. And what has Sugar Sean O'Malley, what has he done in the interim? You know, really, what has he done? And I think that I don't really see a path to victory. I really don't see a path to victory. I think that Merab has proven with his title defense that he's here to stay. And I think that for Sugar Sean O'Malley, I think this is a wrong matchup. I don't know if it's a money play. I don't know if maybe there's something that he knows that we don't know. Maybe he was injured or something like that contributed to his loss. But I just don't see, with the level of inactivity that he's had, he hasn't fought since that fight, how he beats someone that's on the tear like Merab. I just don't see it. So am I excited for the matchup? Kinda. Like, I'm just happy to see Sugar Sean get back in the octagon. You know, another championship fight for him, another main event, but I don't see how he gets it done. I think the path to victory for Merab is to weaponize his cardio like he did before, mix up the wrestling, the strikes to really stifle Sugar Sean O'Malley rhythm, where I feel like Sugar Sean, he's a sniper, he's a counter fighter, so he feeds off that rhythm. And I mean, you really can't counter what you don't know that's coming, you know. So if you have someone constantly switching levels, constantly working, constantly pushing, constantly scrambling, it does fatigue you, and it creates a style that it's hard to hit, and that results in him being outstrucken and dominated. So that was the big news. I'm kind of excited for the fight. I thought it was April Fool's Day, but I'm interested to see what happens. In the co-main event, this is a fight that I predicted on the first episode of the First Strike podcast. I'm super excited for this. I feel like Kayla Harrison is an uncrowned champion. She's so charismatic. She's so fun to watch, and she completely dominates her opponents. Julia Pena is a very marketable fighter. She talks a lot, and you know, she does have a good wrestling background. I mean, she's one of the only fighters to finish Amanda Nunes. So I think that this is going to be a great fight. And I think that Julia Pena, when you look at the division, she's probably the only fighter that has the wrestling credentials to really like stop someone like Kayla Harrison. Like, how does that play? What happens when Kayla Harrison, you know, if Julia Pena can stop the takedown? You know, when I think about someone that her style is it's perfect for this fight, I think Julia Pena is someone that can really be very competitive against Kayla Harrison. I think it's a fight that a lot of the fans want to see, and I think that styles make matchups. So the question is, if Julia Pena is able to stuff the takedowns, you know, what happens in the striking department? Who has a better striking? It's been a while since we've seen Kayla Harrison fight and Julia Pena. So let's see who has improved the most in that time. I'm definitely going to be tuning in. I'm going Kayla Harrison all the way. I think that her grappling credentials, it's not something that you can just combat with wrestling. It's not wrestling takedown. I think that judo pedigree is so strong that her takedowns are very unorthodox. You know, they're coming from the hip. They're coming from the clinch. They're different. It reminds me a little bit of Dan Henderson with the Greco-Roman wrestling, where it's almost like that chest to chest. And I just think it's not going to be a typical single leg or double leg takedown that Julia Pena is going to be facing. It's going to be something more diverse, and I don't know if she's going to be able to stop it. And the problem is, once Kayla Harrison takes you down, 9 times out of 10, the fight is over. So I'm excited to see that fight. I'm going Kayla Harrison all the way. And as the fight gets closer, I'll be dropping down my official prediction. So stay tuned for that. But switching the page, before these big announcements on April 1st, on March 31st, there were several fights announced by GFL, which is the Global Fighting League. And some of these fights are really, really exciting. One in particular that stood out to me is Dillion Danis versus Tony Ferguson. You know, Tony Ferguson holds the record for the longest string of losses, the longest losing streak in the UFC. And now he's going to continue fighting. And he's going to go to GFL to fight Dillion Danis, which is, to me, excellent matchmaking. Because in Dillion Danis, you have someone that has, less than 5 MMA fights. This is a guy that's always been very vocal. He was supposed to fight KSI in a boxing match, and that didn't happen. So for him to fight Tony Ferguson, I feel like we should see him more in MMA. I don't know why we don't see him, especially with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu pedigree, why he doesn't maximize all his marketability in MMA, because he's actually a pretty good fighter and has excellent grappling skills. So I think someone like Tony Ferguson, a legend, despite his losing streak, I think he's someone that has so much experience, and he's going to test Dillion Danis. And to me, it's a test that Dillion Danis should be able to pass. There's other notable fights that were announced. For example, Uriah Faber versus Renan Barão. Renan Barão back in the UFC, he was one of my favorite fighters. And this is actually going to be a rematch. So I'm excited to see them all this years later. And I'm just happy to see what GFL is doing. They're giving opportunities to fighters, to these legends that have given their all to the sports to develop their brands. And one of the things that I will say about the UFC is that the matchmaking is unforgivable. Doesn't matter if you're a legend or not, you're constantly fighting the best. You're fighting sharks, you're fighting prospects, and you're always, you're not necessarily fighting people in your age group, because what happens is in any other sport, even let's say, for example, boxing or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as you get older, they have masters divisions, which is age appropriate, which it makes sense, because if you're in your 40s or 45 or 35, I think it's tough to fight a blue chip prospect, a former NCAA champion or someone undefeated. That's tough. It's just there are different stages in life. So I love what they're doing. They're giving these opportunities to these fighters, give them opportunity to feed their family, and just keep the name going. These guys, they build a brand all over the year. For someone like Uriah Faber, like, I want to see Uriah Faber. I want to see him compete. I want to see him as an element, but I would love to see him compete against people in his age group and give him more of a chance. So I'm definitely excited. That for years, these guys, they faced the best of the best in MMA, and I think it's time that they're in a league that allows them to fight other marketable fighters that may not be in their primes, and that's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, it's entertainment, and I'm gonna be tuning in. I'm gonna be supporting it, because I feel like the more promotions in MMA, more promotions in boxing and wrestling is good for everybody, because it opens up much more doors for fighters, for fans, and also for the media. So I do love and enjoy what GFL is doing, and I can't wait to see their first card. Definitely rooting for Dillion Danis in that fight, and in the Uriah Faber fight, definitely going for Uriah Faber, because I've always seen him since he retired or left the UFC initially, always staying active. Like, he coaches and trains a lot of fighters. He's constantly doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournaments. So to see him come back, get a win, and maybe come back to fighting, I think it's fun. I'm not a big fan of seeing former UFC fighters doing bare knuckle boxing. I think that's something that is just so, there's a different level of brutality and a different level of finesse when you don't have your entire skill set available to you. So there are some successful guys that cross over, for example, like a Mike Perry, but I do think that when you think of former UFC fighters that are no longer competing at the highest level, besides bare knuckle fighting, maybe PFL, like, what other opportunities were there? And even the PFL, the matchmaking is not forgiving. They're putting you up against top prospects that nobody really knows, and tough fighters. So I feel like everybody's tough. So in GFL, you get the opportunity to fight someone that may not be at their prime, but it's still a marketable fighter, and you could get paid and still get your name out there. So I'll definitely be tuning in. I'm excited about that. The other notable news of the week that stood out to me was the Rampage Jackson and Sugar Shot Rashad Evans. The boxing match is no longer going down, so they both agreed to have a rematch of the grudge match from many years ago in boxing. And I feel like the difference between bare knuckle boxing and boxing is boxing is more regulated because there are no gloves in bare knuckle fighting. There's more knockouts. And besides that, there's also more damage, more cuts to the face, more damage to the hands. So I do prefer to see former UFC fighters that enter boxing. I prefer them to go into regular professional boxing as opposed to bare knuckle boxing. So I was very excited to see Rampage Jackson come back. You know, last time I saw him, he was a heavyweight. And I think that for many years, like, he's one of the most popular fighters ever. You know, he was always known for his hands. So if he boxes at any time, I think that it's great for the sport. It's great for everybody. And I would have definitely tuned in. Someone like Rashad Evans, he was definitely known for his knockout punches. Not necessarily known as a boxer, but he's definitely could strike and he definitely could box. So I was definitely excited to see them at this point in their careers, like who has more left in the tank to go, especially in boxing. To my knowledge, they're both making their boxing debuts. I don't think that either of them have fought anybody else in professional boxing, but I may be wrong. I didn't fact check that part. But the reality is that I think it creates more opportunities. So I'm sad that the fight got canceled. And I think that's one of the challenges when we look at promotions, newer promoters coming in and trying to create platforms or events in boxing with MMA fighters. A lot of these promotions, they don't have a history in the sport. So sometimes it does run into a lot of legal issues and also financial issues. Like we saw that there was some sort of issues when Nate Diaz fought Jorge Masvidal. So what happens is a lot of these brands, they try to bank off the marketability of these fighters. They have no experience in the sport. They're trying to put together an event based around the popularity of these fighters, and sometimes the events don't sell well. And because of that, that leads to individuals not getting paid what they're supposed to be paid and promotions going down under. The bigger promotions, you know, sometimes they're not willing to entertain these fights, these boxing fights. So a lot of times when you have like a Nate Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal, it'll be a promoter or a promotion company that you never heard of, or the fighter is creating their own promotional company. And I think the challenges are that they don't have the experience in that event production side. So a lot of these events are not profitable, which leads to other issues. So I don't know if it was a financial issues. To my knowledge, the issue wasn't publicized, why they're not fighting anymore. But I do know that Rashad Evans and Rampage, they're both some of the smartest Hall of Famers, period. So I know that if they're going to fight a boxing match, most likely there was some sort of downside guarantee. So that most likely there was a deposit that had to be paid by a certain date for these guys to really invest in the training camps and to commit to the fight. And if it wasn't paid, guess what, guys? There is no fight. So that wraps it up for episode 13 of the First Strike podcast. I'm so grateful for you guys. Thank you for allowing me to change the combat sports culture forever and ever. We're still paving the way. If you like this video, make sure you comment, subscribe, like, show some love. I'm going to keep dropping weekly episodes. And guess what, guys? In quarter two, the roadmap for First Strike Podcast is to do live interviews. So I'm going to bring you guys some interviews with the most exciting figures, the most notable figures in the world of combat sports. I'm also going to be doing a lot of amateur fighters, a lot of boxers, a lot of MMA fighters, kickboxers, everybody in the world of combat sports. So everything between entry-level fans, experienced fans, to amateur fighters, to promoters, to professional fighters, to legends, to Hall of Famers. I'm trying to bring them to you guys here in the First Strike podcast. So we're definitely going to get it popping. Big plans for the remainder of the year. Especially second quarter, and it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you so much for tuning in. These are my thoughts on everything that happened this past week in the world of combat sports. I am the Marathon Don, and I am out. Woo!